This is Ignite English, and find your English voice.
Let me ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself when you hear this. You're standing in a coffee shop. The line moves. It's your turn. The barista looks at you and asks just one simple question. What size? Or what's your name? And something happens. Your mind goes blank. You know the answer. You've known that word for years. But in that moment, it disappears. You feel your face get warm, you smile awkwardly, and you walk away feeling embarrassed. If that's ever happened to you, this conversation is for you.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a little too specific. That has happened to me. More than once, honestly.
It happens to almost every English learner. And here's the thing. The thing that most people never realize. It's not because your English is bad. It's not because you didn't study enough. It's not because you need more grammar lessons or a bigger vocabulary. The reason your mind went blank in that coffee shop is fear. And fear and language ability are two completely different things.
That's actually kind of a relief to hear, because I always just assumed I wasn't good enough yet, like I needed to study more before I could really speak.
And that's exactly the trap. I'll speak when I'm ready. I'll speak when my English is perfect. But that moment, that perfect, ready moment, it never comes. Not because you're not improving, but because the problem was never really about your English in the first place. Today, I want to talk about what is actually going on, why your mind freezes, why fear interrupts your speech, and more importantly, what you can do about it starting today.
Yeah, I'm really glad we're talking about this. Because every English lesson I've ever seen is about grammar or vocabulary or pronunciation. But no one ever talks about why you freeze, why speaking feels so scary.
Exactly. And it's one of the most important things you can understand about your own learning journey. So let's go back to that coffee shop for a second. You walk in, you've rehearsed your order. Tall latte, please. Simple. You know those words. But then the barista says, "Hey, what can I get for you today? And can I get a name for the order?" And suddenly your brain is doing 5 things at once. You're trying to remember your order. You're worried about your accent. You're watching the people behind you in line. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, the words just vanish.
Yes, that is exactly what happens. It's like a traffic jam in your brain. Everything just stops moving.
A traffic jam. That's a perfect way to describe it. And here's what's important to understand. Your brain didn't forget English. It got overwhelmed. When you feel fear or pressure, your brain activates the stress response. And in that state, the part of your brain that handles complex language, forming sentences, choosing words, actually slows down. So the words aren't gone, they're just stuck behind the fear.
Okay, so it's actually a physical thing that happens in your brain? Not just you being nervous?
It is absolutely a physical thing. And this happens to everyone, even native speakers. Think about it. Have you ever seen a native English speaker get nervous before a big presentation or a job interview and suddenly forget a word they know perfectly well?
Yeah, actually. I have seen that. And it never occurred to me that what they were experiencing and what I experience might be the same thing.
It is the same thing. The only difference is that for you, the fear has an extra layer. You're not just afraid of being judged as a person, you're afraid of being judged for your English. That double weight, what if they don't understand me? What if I say something wrong? Is what makes the freeze happen so fast for English learners.
That double weight thing? That really describes it. Because even when I know the words, there's still this voice in my head saying, but what if it comes out wrong? So it's really perfectionism that's doing a lot of the damage?
Perfectionism is one of the main culprits, yes. And here's the cruel thing about perfectionism. It disguises itself as a good thing. It feels like you're being careful, being responsible, being respectful of the language. But really, it's a wall between your thoughts and your voice. Perfectionism tells you, don't speak until every word is in the right place. But communication doesn't work that way, even for native speakers. Nobody speaks in perfect, polished, complete sentences every time.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Native speakers pause. They say, and, and, you know what? Let me rephrase that. They lose their train of thought. They mispronounce things sometimes. They use informal grammar and casual conversation constantly, and nobody calls them out for it. Nobody thinks less of them. But somehow, English learners hold themselves to a standard that is higher than what native speakers actually do. And that standard, that impossible standard, keeps so many people silent.
Wow. I never really thought about it that way, like I'm holding myself to a standard that nobody else around me even reaches. Yes, please. Because I feel like this is the thing. I understand so much English. I watch movies, I read articles, I follow conversations. But when it's my turn to speak, it's like a completely different skill.
It is a completely different skill. And this is one of the most important things I'll say today. So I really want you to hear it. Understanding English and speaking English are not the same skill. They use different parts of your brain. They require different kinds of practice, and they develop at completely different speeds. Think of it this way. If I put you in front of a piano and played you a beautiful song and then asked you to play it back, could you?
No, definitely not. Even if I loved the song and knew exactly how it sounded.
Right, and nobody would say you have bad ears. Nobody would say you didn't understand the music. You understood it perfectly. You just haven't built the output skill yet. Speaking English is like that. Listening and reading, those are input skills. You receive language, but speaking is an output skill. You produce language in real time, under social pressure, with eyes on you, and that's hard. That's genuinely, legitimately hard. Not because you're not smart enough, but because it requires a type of practice that most traditional English learning almost never gives you.
So when I study grammar and vocabulary, and I feel like I should be able to speak by now, it's because I've been training the wrong skill?
You've been training a real and important skill, but yes, if you want to speak, you have to practice speaking. There's no shortcut around that. And more than that, you have to practice speaking even when it feels uncomfortable, especially then. Because here's the truth. Fluency is not the absence of mistakes. Fluency is the ability to keep going even when you make them.
Fluency is the ability to keep going even when you make mistakes. Okay, I need to sit with that for a second, because I think I've had the wrong definition of fluency in my head this whole time.
Most learners think fluency means speaking without errors or pauses, like a perfectly rehearsed speech. But real conversation is messy. It has pauses and, wait, let me say that differently. When you accept that, when you embrace it, the pressure drops. And when the pressure drops, the words come back.
Okay, so let's talk about how to actually do that. Because knowing this is helpful, but I still need something concrete I can use. Like, what do I actually do when I freeze?
Good, let's get practical. The first tool I want to give you is what I call the two-word start. And it is exactly what it sounds like. When you freeze, what you mean, when your brain goes blank and you can't find the full sentence, you don't need the full sentence. You just need two words. Any two words. The beginning of a thought. I think that's two words. For me, two words. Actually, yeah, two words. The moment you say those two words out loud, something remarkable happens. Your brain gets the signal that you're speaking. It shifts into output mode, and the rest of the sentence, it starts to follow. Not perfectly, but it follows.
So it's like starting the engine. You don't need to know the whole route. You just need to start moving.
Exactly. Start the engine. Because the biggest barrier is that first moment of silence, where your brain is waiting for a perfect sentence before it lets you speak. When you say two words, you break that silence. The second tool is buying time naturally. When someone asks you a question and you need a moment, you can say, "That's a good question," or "Let me think about that for a second," or how do I say this? These phrases keep the conversation moving, show you heard the question, and give your brain a few extra seconds to find the words. And they sound natural because they are natural.
Yeah, I've heard native speakers say, "That's a good question," all the time, but I never thought of it as a tool I could use. I thought I had to already know my answer before I started talking.
And that belief, I have to know my full answer before I start, is one of the biggest sources of freezing. Allow yourself to think out loud. Find the answer as you speak. That's not weakness. That's how natural conversation actually works. The third tool is bridge phrases, little connectors that link your ideas and buy you time. Things like, "And the reason I say that is," or "What I mean is," or "So basically, or "The thing is." These phrases keep the flow going, tell your listener there's more coming, and give you a moment to find your next words.
Those phrases feel so, natural. Like they're not cheating. They're just part of how real speech works.
They are part of real speech. That's the point. You're not faking it. And the fourth tool is asking simple questions to redirect. When you're not sure what to say next, ask a question. Really? What do you think about that? Or, interesting, how did that happen? Or, wow, how long have you been doing that? A simple question does three things. It shows you're listening, it keeps the conversation going, and it takes the pressure off you for a moment while the other person speaks.
That's so smart. Because people love talking about themselves anyway. And if you ask a genuine question, they feel heard, and you get a little breathing room.
Exactly, and what you just said is really important. A genuine question. Because curiosity is one of the most powerful tools in any conversation. When you're genuinely curious about the other person, your attention shifts from, am I speaking correctly, to, what are they saying? And that shift alone reduces anxiety enormously. The more you focus on them, the less you're focused on judging yourself. And when the self-judgment goes quiet, the words start to flow.
Okay, let's talk about mistakes. Because I think that's still a really big thing for a lot of people. Even knowing all of this, mistakes still feel terrifying.
Let's talk about mistakes, and I want you to really believe this, not just intellectually, but in your gut. Mistakes do not matter as much as you think they do. When you use the wrong tense or mix up a word or mispronounce something, what actually happens? In most cases, nothing. The conversation continues. They understood you. Life moves forward.
Right, like most people aren't sitting there grading your English. They're just trying to understand what you're saying.
Most people are just trying to understand you. And when native speakers hear someone with an accent or small grammar errors, the most common feeling is actually admiration. Wow, this person speaks a second language. But your fear brain tells you the worst-case story. Everyone is judging me. That fictional, inaccurate story is what stops you from speaking. You are suffering for a judgment that, in most cases, was never even made.
Wow, that's kind of a painful truth, but also a freeing one. Because if the judgment I'm afraid of isn't even real most of the time, then what am I actually protecting myself from?
And that is the question, and the honest answer is, you're protecting yourself from discomfort, from feeling imperfect in front of another person. That's human. But here's what the silence costs you. Every time you stay quiet when you wanted to speak, you reinforce the belief that speaking is dangerous. Your brain learns, staying silent kept me safe, and it gets harder the next time. Silence feels like safety, but it's actually a cage.
Silence feels like safety, but it's actually a cage. That really landed for me. Because I've always thought of staying quiet as being safe. But you're right. Every time I do it, it gets a little harder to break out of it.
And the reverse is also true. Every time you speak, even imperfectly, even nervously, even with a shaky voice, you send your brain a different message. You say, I spoke and I survived, it wasn't perfect and I survived, I made a mistake and I survived. And your brain is always listening to what you do, not just what you think, what you do, so every small act of speaking is training your brain out of fear. Not by thinking your way through it, by doing your way through it.
Doing your way through it. Not thinking your way through it. That's a shift I needed to hear.
You cannot think your way into confidence. You can only act your way into it. Confidence is not something you find before you speak. It's something you build by speaking. And I know that sounds almost backwards, but I need confidence before I can speak. No, you need to speak. Even without confidence, and then the confidence begins to grow from that. Every small moment of courage creates a little more of it for next time.
So in a way, the learners who are waiting to feel confident before they speak are waiting for something that can only come from speaking. It's like waiting to feel strong before you go to the gym.
That's a perfect analogy. You don't become strong and then go to the gym. You go to the gym and you become strong. Speaking is the gym for your English confidence. And just like the gym, the first few times are the hardest. Your muscles are sore. You feel out of place. You wonder if you're doing it right, but you keep going. And slowly, it becomes normal. It becomes yours.
I love that. So the speaking practice is the work, not the preparation for the work.
The speaking practice is the work. The conversation is the lesson. The mistake is the teacher. You don't need a perfect moment to start. You need an imperfect moment and the courage to speak into it anyway. Because I think the belief, I'm just not good enough yet, is living in the hearts of so many people listening right now.
Yeah. I think that's the core of it, isn't it? This feeling of not yet. Not yet good enough, not yet ready, not yet.
Not yet is a story that keeps you waiting for a finish line that doesn't exist. Here is what I want you to really hear. You are good enough to speak now. Not perfectly, not without mistakes, but good enough to try. Good enough to connect with another human being. Your accent is not a problem. It's the sound of where you come from. Your mistakes are not failure. Your mistakes are proof that you tried.
Your mistakes are proof that you tried. I've never heard it said like that before. Usually mistakes feel like proof that you're not good enough, but looking at them as proof of courage. That changes something.
It changes the meaning of the whole experience. When you believe your mistakes mean, I'm not enough, every mistake shrinks you. But when you believe your mistakes mean, I am trying, you can hold them with pride. You spoke. In a language you chose to learn, to fight for, to build piece by piece. That is something to be deeply, honestly proud of. You are doing something remarkable, and the fear you feel, it's not a sign you should stop. It's a sign that you care. That care is beautiful. But when caring so much makes you freeze and go silent, the care has to find a new shape. Not, I care so much I can't speak, but I care so much I'm going to try anyway. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is speaking in spite of it.
Courage is speaking in spite of the fear. Not after the fear is gone. In spite of it. While it's still there.
While it's still there, with the shaky voice and the racing heart, you open your mouth and let the words out anyway. Not waiting for a better moment. This moment. These words. Even imperfect. Let them out. Because on the other side of that fear, you speak. And the world doesn't end. And the person in front of you responds. And a real connection begins.
I feel like we should talk about what someone can do after they listen to this. Like right now, today. What's one thing someone can do to start breaking out of this?
The one thing, today, not next week, not when you feel more ready, today, find one moment to say 2 words in English, out loud, to a real person. It could be thank you to the cashier with actual eye contact. It could be good morning to someone at work. It could be, I think, at the beginning of a sentence in a meeting. 2 words, out loud, today. Feel how the world doesn't collapse, and remember that feeling, because that's the foundation.
I love that. Because it's small enough to actually do. It doesn't feel scary the way go have a long conversation in English today feels scary.
Small enough to actually do. That is the key to building any new courage. You don't start at the top of the mountain. You take one step, and then one day you look back and realize how far you've come. And I want to end with this. You have been learning English, you have been working, you have been trying. Even on the days when the words didn't come, you were still showing up. And showing up, even imperfectly, even with fear, that is not failure. That is courage. And your voice, your real voice in English, accented and imperfect and brave, that voice deserves to be heard.
I don't think I've ever had someone talk about this with this much depth and care before. Most people talk about English like it's just a technical skill, but you're talking about it like it's connected to your whole identity, your whole sense of self.
Because it is. That is exactly what it is. When you silence yourself in a language, when fear keeps you from speaking, it's never just about the language. It's about whether you believe you have the right to take up space, whether you believe your thoughts are worth expressing, whether you believe you belong in the conversation. And you do. You belong in the conversation, not when you're perfect. Now, today, exactly as you are, you belong. You belong in the conversation. And if you remember nothing else from today, remember this. You don't have a speaking problem. You have a speaking habit that fear interrupted. And habits can change. Your voice has always been ready. The only question now is whether you're ready to let it out.
I'm ready, and I think a lot of people listening to this just decided they are too. Thank you. Genuinely. This was one of the most important conversations I've been a part of.
Thank you for asking the honest questions, the ones that took courage, because someone out there needed to hear them asked. And to everyone listening, go use your voice today. Even just 2 words. It's enough. You're enough. Now go speak.